You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Monday. We are finally back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, unless you have a severe allergic reaction to medication. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. So we are back today. That was not an intentional absence of 2 days last week, Thursday and Friday. I still went to the press conference, but the Jim Harbaugh press conference, which is what we're going to talk about in this episode. And we're going to double up today. We're going to get to the mailbag that was supposed to be last Thursday. But yeah, as I said, remember how I had that sore throat and it turned out it was an ear infection and all that? Well, they put me on penicillin, cleared up my ear infection, but ended up having an allergic reaction to the penicillin. So I was heavily Benadrylled and put on steroids and all this kind of stuff because I was head to toe, no anaphylactic shock, but was pretty knocked out. So, and didn't obviously want to be on camera. Obviously, we could have done it just audio, but I didn't really have the energy for that. So just to explain where I was, better now, thankfully. I think it's 100% gone or 95-ish% gone at this point. But it was it wasn't a fun way to end the week last week. Anyway, we did get Jim Harbaugh for spring ball after they had already had two practices. They had another practice, and I believe they're on spring break this week. So I don't know that we're going to get anyone this week. But we did talk to Jim Harbaugh, and there was a lot of things that came out of that I thought were interesting. So that's what we're going to spend today doing, at least this episode. And then the second episode will be the mailbag. But I thought it was... there was a lot of good stuff that came from it. The big one was kind of the reiteration of something I mentioned on the show that I had gotten from a source that I mentioned last week. I think I got it from the source 2 weeks ago. They had spoken of Amorion Walker as being, the likely starter. And it sounds like that's kind of where that's trending right now. I mean, Jim Harbaugh said he would be a starter right now at cornerback. That is huge news. And in the way they talk about him is very similar in the way that they talked about Mike Sainristil at this time last year. I said Mike Sainristil is in that mix for that corner spot as well, on top of being a nickel. I would imagine you're going to see a rotation. I would imagine you're going to see some Mike Sainristil at corner and him moving to nickel and all of those types of things, which, I mean, that's something like he wanted to get a lot better at the technical aspect and everything like that because he felt like he was just kind of living off of talent and what he remembered from high school in a lot of ways. But with Amorion Walker, they're talking about his size, his instincts, and things of that nature, and making it clear that he has some things that you just can't teach. And that's really something that kind of perks you up a little bit, Like, it's still a little scary, right? Because you would ideally, it would be, in a lot of ways, a guy like Miles Pollard or someone else who's kind of come up through the system already that was already recruited as a cornerback. But there's nothing saying that you can't have a guy switch position. Jim Harbaugh's had a good track record with that. At least better than average. Not all of his moves have been great. And, you can debate Kalel Mullings at the moment, considering his fumble cost you 7 points. You really can't debate Ben Mason, which didn't work out, but Mike Sainristil's worked out. He played Jabril all over the place. His biggest success was almost certainly Richard Sherman moving from wide receiver to cornerback back in his Stanford days. He's got a pretty good track record of finding. I know I'm probably forgetting someone there, but he's got a pretty good track record of being able to see a guy and say, you know what? Hassan Haskins comes in as a running back, switches over to linebacker, switches back to running back at the end of the 2018 season. So he's had a couple of those, right? That they've certainly, I feel, have had more under Jim Harbaugh experimentation with that. But usually he won't go so far as to be like, this guy's a starter. Like right now, this guy's a starter. If it isn't playing out in a positive direction to some point. So while that would take one potentially talented wide receiver off the board, maybe not. I mean, he said like the goal here in spring is to get him fully acclimated to corner, make sure he has all that down, and then we can reintroduce some wide receiver aspects come fall camp. So we'll see if that ends up coming to fruition, but that's encouraging, at least that they feel like they're in a good spot. That's the one position opposite Will Johnson is the one position that we are unsure about, right? And that's what I asked him. I said, you know, who are you eyeing for that position opposite Will Johnson? And right now, that seems to be the trend is Amorion Walker. So again, you make a big leap year 1 to year 2. He's had some time on task. This isn't like he didn't get some time at corner last year. I mean, he was out there even in the Hawaii game playing corner. So, I mean, like these had his moments where he's been out there and doing this. They've been kind of prepping him for this opportunity. And, you know, even under some of the previous coaches on the defensive side, they've really liked their tall, rangy guys. He's supposedly really fast. He's got ball skills. He's a wide receiver. It could pay some dividends. So I'm curious. This might be a fun topic for maybe a show tomorrow of if you could sit here and figure out what other guys you could switch positions with. Who would they be? The only other one we know of this offseason, to my current recollection, is Alessandro Lorenzetti. He was out, I believe, it was Dom Giudice who was out with injury, but Alessandro Lorenzetti was an offensive lineman last year, and he is a defensive lineman now. Not all of them have always worked out. Jack Stewart didn't really, you know, I know there was another one of those kind of like sneaky, quiet type guys that was an offensive lineman, that was a defensive lineman that nothing really ever ended up happening. That seems to happen here and there in the Harbaugh regime. But nonetheless, I think that this is an interesting move that could really pay dividends. Like I said last week, someone had told me that they had seen Amorion Walker as being a starter. This is before spring practice even started. That they were talking about the staff up and down, or not the staff, but the personnel up and down. And when they got to corner, they're like, Will Johnson and Amorion Walker, that might be the best starting duo, cornerback duo in the country. Saying it as it was a fact. So we will see. We'll continue talking about what Jim Harbaugh had to say. I want to talk about a really good question that Anthony Broom asked, and regarding JJ McCarthy. I ended up writing about that earlier today as well. We're going to do that here in just a moment. Before we do that, looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories? Well, you have got to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays, and I know my goal is to eat a little healthier this year. If you're like me and you want to eat healthier but don't want to compromise taste, then man, I've got just the thing for you. You've got to try Built. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious, you won't think that they're good for you. Perfect for your New Year's resolution. What makes Built Bars so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is that they're healthy. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar without a whopping 14 grams of protein. Or sorry, with a whopping, not without. And now you don't even have to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built bars at Built.com. Well, now you can get them at your local Walmart or at Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today. Walk back to the pharmacy section. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. Or you can head to your local Sam's Club and run in and grab a 13-bar box of these hit flavors, brownie batter and churro. You can thank me later. No surprise, but Jim Harbaugh absolutely gushed over JJ McCarthy. He was asked first by Angelique Shingelis of the Detroit News. I don't know why I'm attributing all of these, but I am. About who the backup quarterback is, and he just did his normal thing where he was like, I want to talk about JJ McCarthy right now. And he did mention the backups. Sounds like it's a battle between Davis Warren and Jack Tuttle. Says they both have come on strong. He said Jaden Denegal has been really impressive in the early going as well. Did mention Alex Orji as well, so it's not like he was left out. But really wanted to talk about JJ McCarthy and saying like, he's an absolute leader. I would follow him anywhere. I would advise, if he does anything for the team, I'd advise his teammates to follow him anywhere, all that kind of stuff. That's a little waxing poetic. But I think the more interesting thing is what Anthony Broome, my good friend, my Disney compatriot, it's how the whole thing got started for you haters out there that hate the grown men talking about Disney. It all started with Anthony Broome and I at the Citrus Bowl going to Disney the day before and after the game. Anyhow, it's he asked, what can you take away really from the late season with JJ McCarthy? I'm paraphrasing poorly, but kind of asking like, when you look at that TCU game, what are the pluses, negatives you can take away from JJ McCarthy in that game? And I like the way that Jim Harbaugh kind of approached it, because he looked at it and said, it's like he underwent an entire season's worth of experience in one game. And that's pretty true. I mean, that was a pretty epic game in a lot of ways, right? Like, there were moments where it felt like Michigan was going to really get blown out. And there were moments where it seemed like Michigan was obviously going to win. And then before you know it, it seems like Michigan's going to get blown out again. And then before you know it, it seems like Michigan's going to win. And just the battle. And some of it was making really good decisions, making really big plays. Obviously, the 2 pick sixes were really bad decisions. But Jim Harbaugh says, like, hey, he really kind of underwent an entire season's worth of game all in one. I do want to read some of what he had to say here. He said, he reminded it's his whole first season as starter as well. And he said he was good, he was bad, he was cheered, he was booed. I don't remember him being booed, but okay. Hit, run, throw, everything he did is just about as good as it could be. First year starter, no question about it. I don't think anybody's ever seen anything. I haven't seen anything like that first year starting quarterback. I believe that we have, not necessarily at Michigan, but certainly, I mean, CJ Stroud had a really good first year. Bryce Young had a really good first year. Trevor Lawrence had a really good first year. There's been a lot of really good first year quarterbacks. Dwayne Haskins had an amazing first year. So nonetheless, as he mentioned, 13-0 on Christmas, and we've never been undefeated at Christmas. So I call that a season for him. The TCU game in itself, I think, was practically like a whole season of experience because of all the things that happened. Behind, come back, really behind, come back, really good. Every up, down hit. He was just in so many football situations in that game and was almost like a whole season, so it was really good. And I think that's our answer. Or even to the other question, this happens, that happens, the other thing happens. This program has become like good. Okay, we lost that game, but it drives us. It makes us even more hungry. Something else comes up. Good. We'll work on that. We'll fix that. It's a place right now. One analogy I can make to it, just how good in terms of a culture, a family that this Michigan football program is, it's almost in my mind like some of those housing markets that have become recession proof, and they're just as good no matter what's coming from the outside of here. And to see everybody here, it's almost like what a superhero, an attack comes in. It's like we're able to absorb it, spit it back out in some kind of laser fashion. And you just see the way they attack the next day. And every day, it's phenomenal to be around on a day-to-day basis. So that's a little bit more than just JJ. But I like his analogy more so to the one game season than anything else. I don't know that I like the recession-proof housing thing. I don't think that Michigan's there. I think 2 years is a trend, but it's. I think you need to continue to build on that before it's like this. We're too big to fail, But I do feel like it's that the JJ stuff. It has a lot of learning moments and a lot, like you said, a lot of football situations. I think the important thing moving forward here is for JJ to get utilized more early. That was my criticism last year. It remains my criticism this year. I understand you feel like you can win games by running Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards as much as you want. However, I think that it's better to get JJ into some of those situations earlier rather than waiting until the very last game of the season when things kind of become FUBAR, and then suddenly you need to thrust him into that situation And while I think he did an admirable job, I know people were really mad at him after the game. 2 pick sixes, hard not to be mad at that. But the reason why Michigan was in a very close position to winning that game was Michigan nearly won the game because of J.J. McCarthy. It also did lose the game in part because of J.J. McCarthy, as well as all of the defensive miscues that happened in that game. So there's a lot that you can kind of take away from that. But I like the idea that, again, they feel like all of this is, okay, now we know. Now the question, as we have a whole nother season to embark upon, is did they actually learn from the how do we know? Because you don't, I liken it to, I remember being an ardent Detroit Tigers fan. I'm not really a baseball guy at this juncture in my life, but I certainly was in, 2006 through, before 2006, but, thinking about the Detroit Tigers run from 2006 forward. 2006, so exciting. Go to the World Series, lose it, but you're like, all right, can't wait till the next year. A couple years later, you've got Miguel Cabrera, you've got everything kind of just, it feels like things are about to go on the up and up, and you get to 2011, they don't quite make it. 2012, they get to the World Series and lose again. And at some point, especially when you're going that far, it stops being, the excitement starts to wear off, right? Because it's like, okay, we're really good, but when's that thing going to come? And to me, when you're in that mode, there's nothing more depressing than hearing the term pitchers and catchers report, spring training. Because it's like, and it's a little bit different with baseball. It's 162 games. It's a season that ranges from April until October. It's such a long season. It's not that long in football, but nonetheless, it's like when you hear that, because you're still like a month and a half away at best from actual baseball, it's like, oh, we got to start this all over again. You don't want Michigan to get to that point. You're going to have to find a way to reach the mountaintop, or at least advance. Like we've talked about the climb on this show and how exciting it was. For instance, I brought up the Detroit Pistons going from 02-03 to 03-04. It's enjoying that climb. Well, you have to actually climb. It's don't just get to one rung and hang on. And it was a perfect opportunity that was squandered this past year. So you hope that they actually learned the lesson. And you hope that J.J. McCarthy learned the lessons. And he's the type, as Jim Harbaugh said in the questions, a couple questions earlier, is that he, as far as anything you tell him, any coaching point that you give, he just absorbs it and will make the correction immediately, is tremendous. So you hope, but Michigan's got to put him in a position to succeed. Michigan's got to give him that opportunity. I think that you have a great opportunity with the running backs and everybody, but I think you need to be a little bit more holistic. So I think that's the question, is what does it look like? Let's maybe continue talking about it. I think I still have some more things to say about it. We'll do that here in a moment. All right. Like I said, this is show 1 of 2 today. I feel like my tag for my hoodie is. I know there's probably some very upset people that I'm wearing a Tulane hoodie. If you're watching on here. I want to remind you, I went to the University of Michigan. I was born at the University of Michigan Hospital. But, hey, I got love for this hoodie when I walked into Schembechler Hall one day wearing it. George Hilo was all excited to see the Tulane hoodie because one of his brothers went to Tulane. So, plus it's sweet. It's from home field. We'll wear some of the Michigan stuff a little when it's not freezing cold. I don't know where my Michigan hoodie is. Well, I know where my one is, but I wore it yesterday. I wore it to church, the one from Valiant. But nonetheless, so I really like the direction of the way that they at least are looking at this team at this juncture. We didn't get any grand platitudes about scary good and stuff like that about the team yet, but you get this confidence, obviously, because like he said, every mistake that they've made, they lose one game last year, and it's a learning. They're not. I think it's really interesting that they're not doing kind of the Ohio State, Alabama route. Now, granted, those are teams that have won national championships in the last decade, Obviously, Alabama a lot. Ohio State won 9 years ago. Crazy. But they're not doing it's just unacceptable. To go in there and lose, it's unacceptable. That's doing more of the, hey, this is great because now we've learned things that we didn't know before, and now we can fix them. We know what our deficiencies are. We, as in the Office Space term, fixed the glitch. So I will be interested to see. The unfortunate thing is it's February right now, and we're not going to know really. Maybe not until October. Maybe not until November if they actually fix the glitch. Probably October. Back-to-back road games. Nebraska, Minnesota. You got Michigan State in there. But I think that the more troubling stretches, Penn State, Maryland, Ohio State, I would say. That's, I think, when we're really going to know what this team is all about. However, it's, as we talked about ad nauseum, fifth most experienced team in returning production in the country. And usually that bodes very well. Usually. So, especially when you're a team like Michigan that just made it to the college football playoff and was expected to go to the national championship game. So if they learn from their mistakes, I think just as important is the coaches having learned from their mistakes. Not being too cute in the red zone. If you're at second and goal and you've got a Donovan Edwards, I understand that you have Kalum Mullings to be a short yardage back. Maybe the stage is a little too big. It's a little bit different doing it again, in the Purdue game than it is in the Big Ten championship game, which is certainly not with the same height of expectation or excitement as the Ohio State game or the college football playoff, survive or die moment. I would rather see you hand it off to Donovan Edwards, even if Donovan Edwards isn't Blake Corum, where you kind of expect him to grind out some yards in the same way. Or if you're going to be inventive, don't do the Philly special, do something a little bit different that's a little bit more high probability than rolling out your tight end and throwing to a quarterback. Don't get too cute. So, that's a part of it, is you hope that the staff has learned those lessons, that those are the same things. Now, Matt Weiss is gone. It's Sharon Moore's show as offensive coordinator. Jesse Minter had an incredible second half track record until he didn't. You hope that, assuming that he is not going to Philadelphia, I haven't really looked up to see if where they're at in their interview process for defensive coordinator. Obviously, that would be a huge blow to Michigan. If he was to depart, I would probably say it's likely that he doesn't. I feel like if you're running so many things back, you've got all of this talent, you've got all the offensive line is just insanely loaded. Defensive line looking pretty good. I mean, even the linebacker position you feel like pretty good about, right? Like that's where we're at. Like basically you go up and down the entire roster, which we've done ad nauseum on this show as well. And it all feels pretty good. So the key part is twofold. Did you actually learn the lessons that you just talked about? Number one. Number two, it's and I'm starting to kind of forget myself here. It's just playing up to your level. I think that's the thing is the great unknown for me entering any football season is who's going to make plays. What are those big plays that are going to be made? Because we've certainly lived through moments in Michigan football history, especially the more near-term history, where we have seen players make plays at times, and then we've seen those same teams struggle against lesser teams. I'm thinking, of course, about 2013 and going from the highs of Notre Dame in week 2 to the lows of Akron the following week. Now, that was a long time ago. Of course, that was pre-Harbaugh, but, that memory remains. So there is always an aspect of who's going to go out there and make plays. And it always seems like guys that make plays sometimes early in the season, it's like they're the next sensation. Roman Wilson was that kind of for Michigan last year. And then by the end of the year, you're kind of wondering what happened to them. Brandon Herron, 2011, it's on Sports Center, 2 interceptions, I think there were 2 pick sixes, right? And It's like, oh, Brandon Herron, this dude from out of nowhere. But we weren't talking about him by the year's end. So how do you mitigate that and get your best players to play great early? Now, maybe don't see that in these types of non-conference games that they're going to be playing. But they need to ramp. That same climb needs to happen more so in this season, even the last season, because it is so lopsided. It feels like it like I said earlier, the last 3 games feel like they're probably the hardest in the season based off of we don't know what Nebraska or Minnesota will be. Indiana and Rutgers probably not going to be that good. Michigan State. Michigan has no business losing to Michigan State this year. Doesn't mean they can't or that they won't. They have no business losing to them, however. So it's those last 3 games that I look at and say, that's the tough part. Maryland, they tend to beat Maryland. I think Maryland's going to be pretty good. I think I predicted them to be 9-3 this year. But Michigan's got to find a way to be able to weather a storm of Penn State, Maryland, Ohio State. Now, they weathered that storm pretty well. The exact same scenario a couple years ago. Maryland, however, not that good. Penn State that year, also not that good. But it was the same exact deal. At Penn State, at Maryland, home against Ohio State. See if they can do that again in 2023. Anyway, all right, we're going to do the mailbag next. So keep an eye out for that if you don't see it posted. If it's video, who knows when it'll get posted. The internet here, not great. Lately, if I try to upload something, the whole world stops. I can't write. I can't go on Twitter. I can't go on my phone. I can't go on Instagram or TikTok or watch TV or any of that stuff. So anyhow, it takes a while and it just completely shuts down the internet for me. All right. Mailbag's up next. Thanks for watching. Thank you for listening. Peace.